Hey guys, welcome. We are now in week 3 on Monday, and this is the week of peace, and this is about the King. And first, we're reading from Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 33, and from the NLT. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a village in Galilee, to a virgin named Mary. She was engaged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of King David. Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you." Confused and disturbed, Mary tried to think what the angel could mean. "Don't be afraid, Mary," the angel told her, "for you have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will name him Jesus. And he will be very great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he will reign over Israel forever. His kingdom will never end."
Yeah. I I love that ending. I mean, especially because if you go back, I think it's the first verse that we did in Micah. Maybe it's the last. It was in week 1. But I mean, it talks a lot about, so a lot of times the throne of David, or they'll talk about David in the Old Testament, is actually referencing Jesus in the New Testament. So not always. Sometimes they're actually talking about David. But usually when it says things like his throne will reign forever, or he will reign forever, usually references to Jesus. Because there's a lot of Old Testament. We saw that last week when it talked about John moving in the power of Elijah. So you'll see a lot of these, like David, Moses, Elijah. There's a few other prophets that are kind of like looked at as these archetypes that are like what the Messiah is going to look like. But obviously they all fail, so none of them can be the Messiah, but they're like ideas of what the Messiah is going to look like in the future. And so here he finishes with that: "We'll give him the throne of his ancestor David, and he'll reign over Israel forever, and his kingdom will never end." So it's kind of tying that back and showing that he is the Messiah, like like he is fulfilling the prophecy before he's even born. But here, what I was talking about a little bit is, the entire thing I was talking about was just who Mary and Joseph are. Because when we look at who God chooses, whether it's a prophet, or whether in this case it's Mary to carry his son, or even Elizabeth and Zachariah, there's a lot to be said about why is he choosing these people. He's not just like over here like eeny meeny miny mo. Our youngest daughter Anya's really into that right now. That's not how he's making decisions. I am sure at this point that Joseph is not the only ancestor of David. Right? Like there's other people he could have chosen, but these are the ones that they chose. And it just makes me think of Jesus being born in a manger. Like there's being born in Bethlehem. Like there's all of these places that you would expect something more.
Right.
You'd expect something grander.
Yeah. And it goes to speaking to the heart of God, and what he is about is so different than what we are about. It's not like he was born to Herod, who's the king.
Right.
It's like he was born to Mary and Joseph into the manger. And that goes to what Jesus himself said, that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve.
Right.
And that now we should follow in that example, where it's like, however high you think you are, other people want to put you up.
Right.
The best way to move forward is to humble yourself and to serve others and try to raise them up around you.
Right.
Right. And also, I mean, it's like the best way to handle yourself anyway. How much do we just all love that person?
Right.
That when they show up, it's like, oh, even if they're like succeeding at everything they do, like a Joseph,
Right.
they're doing nothing but trying to pull everyone up with them as they are going about their life.
Right. And that's the person that everyone is attracted to and wants to be around, because they're the person that they feel seen and cared for as well. I think the other thing is, and I think I said this in the devotion portion too, is like, what are we looking at as a value system versus what God is looking at? Because I am sure that if you looked at Mary or if you looked at Joseph, you wouldn't think, yes, these are the people who the Son of God would be born to, right? Like you might think it would be a Sadducee, or someone who was at least in the Jewish community. I mean, maybe not Herod, but like someone who's in the Jewish community who's somebody important,
Right.
you know? But when we look at stuff, like God looks at our heart.
Yeah.
God looks at our spirit. Like he's seen
Yeah.
what other people don't. I mean, the fact that Jesus even wasn't like good looking,
Right.
you know, like he could have been like this
Plain.
He could have been beautiful.
Oh,
you
right.
know, like he could have been like the
Oh,
best
yeah.
looking person ever born.
Mhm.
But that's because that's not what God wanted people. God didn't want people to look at that in him.
Mhm.
God wanted people to see his heart and see his actions. And he wants to see the same thing from us.
Mhm.
But what's really hard is, especially in this day and age with social media and like
Right.
where it is so easy to take like the good photo,
Yeah.
right? Or to Photoshop something or to look at somebody's life and think like, oh, like they have everything, or if I could just be them. And it's like, you have no idea
Mhm.
what's actually happening
Mhm.
behind the scenes. I mean, to give you a point, just so you know, this might look pretty right here, but we are sitting in a room surrounded by chairs. It's a store. We're in a storage room.
It's a storage
It's a
room.
storage room. We're surrounded by chairs and tables, and we just gave you the best possible angle.
Let's go.
You know?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's where we live. And
Mhm.
it's so hard to not get sucked into that visual content.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, that's okay. Like, it's okay to be inspired by it. It's okay to be uplifted. It's okay to engage for that stuff. But when you turn around and you look at your own life, when you look at other people,
Mhm.
are you valuing them based off of that? Are you valuing yourself based off of that?
Right.
Or are you looking at yourself and saying, like, I'm trying my hardest, I'm showing at my best?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because like the person who's trying to lift up other people, like going back to your
Right.
point about the leader,
Yeah.
like the person who's trying to lift other people up, that's going to take away time from them.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't live at the pace that the social media world, where it's like snapshot. I see you how you are now. I'm going to assess what can I get from you, whether or not I should engage or whatever. But it's instead showing up in the real world around people and bringing that patience, bringing that love, and actually being an anchor so that when people come around you, they feel your actual presence instead of feeling like you're just here
Right.
in your present, but instead like you're actually like standing ready to then receive whatever I have to give
Right.
and reciprocate.
Right.
Because there's so little of that going on where people
Right.
just want like the surface level stuff.
Engagement, right?
Mhm.
Versus actually being seen by somebody. Yeah, I don't remember actually if I chose this verse, so we'll find out next week. But there's one of the verses I was looking at for this Advent was talking about paying people back and
Mhm.
how like even people who don't believe in God like pay people back, you know? And so it's like give without expecting anything back.
Mhm.
And I think like, you know, it's like when you look at a lot of stuff in the Bible, like sometimes it's like cultural to that moment. But for us, I think one of the biggest things we can give right now is our time.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, finances are huge. Like there's so many people who need support through finances. Mary and Jeff Heckers run the meal ministry. Like there's people who need you to show up like in those sorts of ways. But there are so many times when I have been the most helped by somebody literally just giving me their time and their presence for that moment. And those are the moments I've usually sat and been like, this is what it's like to sit with someone who's sad in the presence of God.
Yeah.
Like when someone sits with you and you feel that like sense of peace and that like patience and that like they're just like there to be with you. Byron's grandpa actually is one of those people who I would go when we would go over to their house, to his grandparents' house, and we'd be by them. I'd be like, this is someone who has sat in the presence of God and they have carried it with them. And now like I get to like reciprocate that. And I'm like, this is what God's love feels like.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's what when God looks at people, that's what he's looking at. He's looking at like, what does your heart say?
Yeah.
And what are you doing in this moment? And then when we look at other people, are we seeing them as children of God? Are we seeing them as honored and beautiful and worthy of our time and worthy of our energy? You know, because it's like, I don't know that other people were looking at Mary. I mean, even when Jesus grew up and Jesus is preaching, you know, they're like, well, isn't this the son of Joseph?
Yeah.
The carpenter?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they were thinking it. And it's like, what are we doing when we look at people? And are we valuing them for what they can give us? Or are we valuing them for who they are in God? And are you returning that and looking at yourself that way too?
Right.
Because it's so easy to get sucked into everything that you were talking about. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Where it's like, I'm like looking at my value compared to the values of the world. And when I start to look at my value compared to God's value,
Yeah.
I then start to feel that goodness and that peace, that like really deep peace that's within me. And then from that place, I can act out of peace towards others.
Right. Well, and this is just something that I've been thinking about lately a lot, is that as Christians, giving people like the space to be repentant, because in not holding, this is how you acted before, and holding that over them, but allow their repentance to then be how you see them with the eyes of God, where it's like, they're calling themselves this. Don't hold people's past, like, because how else are we going to reach out to people when we're constantly like getting at them for what they were doing before they accepted God, you know, and also those are the people we're reaching, so it's like, allow them to come in,
in their brokenness, but then that also allows you to be broken, because we're all going to screw up at some point. Your humanness is going to come out.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so you have the questions in the discussion today to answer. And I know I say this, but a lot of them, Gently is a really beautiful song. Just so you know, if you go to the website, thirsty.com/Advent, the whole list of the Spotify list of songs is on there. If you have Spotify, it'll play through fine. If you don't have Spotify, it only plays for a little bit. But you can also search these songs on YouTube, Pandora, wherever you listen to music, and you'll be able to find them. That's why I put the artist and song in there too. So, All right, we will see you guys later.